Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Undoctrinate. I am your regular host, Chev, aka Alex Ford, for those who don't know my actual name, but I go by Chev at work and with friends, so it's a regular nickname, not just an internet nickname. And I've got two co-hosts with me today, and I'm going to go over what the show's going to be about in a second, but let's introduce you guys first. So I got Dakota, welcome.
Hello.
And also Dan, welcome.
Hello. That was a weird hand.
Yeah. You need a better camera, and Dakota needs a better graphics card.
I'm just gonna switch to my regular.
Oh, it's totally fine. But anyway, so
Not for me. It's slowing my whole thing down.
All right. Well, you guys can mess with that while I go ahead and introduce the show here. So, bear with me, you guys. I'm going to take about 5 minutes here and just go over the show and also just have some things I want to say. So, this show, it's called Undoctrinate, and I've been brewing this one for about a year or more. I've had the domain name for like 10 years. And I've wanted to do a show. I didn't know what to do with the domain name for a long time. It was going to be a blog originally. But in this past year, I decided I wanted to make it a podcast. And I've, since 2016, for obvious reasons with the way politics have gone and stuff like that, I've really just started to kind of go downhill emotionally a little bit. The state of the world and the state of this country in particular, the United States, is just... A lot of things are depressing. I think we can all agree there. Whether no matter how you feel about certain things or what your political beliefs are, there's definitely a lot of stuff in the world that's not going great right now. And now we've got the pandemic going on, and so I started to go a little stir crazy, which is, for me, a pretty big deal because I am a homebody. I stay home most of the time. And so for me to be, not being able to go out of the house and kind of going a little nuts over it is a big deal. And so I decided, finally, let's pull the trigger on this thing. This is going to be something positive in my life. That's the whole goal. Something productive, where I feel like that we can contribute something to society in whatever small way we can. I spent a lot of time bitching and moaning about the state of things and complaining about Trump and complaining about just even, Democratic politics, which I'm sure we'll get into plenty in other episodes. Like, tons of the Democrats, these centrist Democrats, don't give a crap about the public either. There's just tons of corporate shills in the government. Lots of things we'll get into, but politics, particular, gets me down, gets me mad, and it's an emotional roller coaster. And so I was like, well, okay, so I just sit and complain all the time. I'm not helping. What can I do besides go out and riot? I'm not going to go, I'm not to the point yet anyway, that I'm going to go put myself at risk. I'm not going to go, put my job or my family at risk to make my statement yet. And so for me, I thought, well, let's use the internet. The internet's full of garbage right now anyway, so why don't we just use it to do something positive? So here we are. We can go into more about that, and so where you guys can engage with me too, and we're going to talk about some very preliminary high-level topics. But before we do that, I want to talk about what happened a week ago. This is the week anniversary of my grandpa's death, and I apologize if I get a little choked up while talking about it. I will just start by saying he and I weren't close. So... like when I was growing up, we were closer, and I looked up to him, and he was a smart guy, and we had lots of interesting conversations, and I actually have a lot of memories of things that he woke me up about, or at least got me thinking about, even if I disagree with them now. But stuff like he used to ask me what I believed about certain things, and then when I said I don't know, he would chastise me for saying I can't be a fence sitter. And while I think that's actually a silly argument now, it was something that got me thinking about something like, why would you say that? Like, it was one of those things where he didn't have a reason, and so my little kid brain started thinking about it. And I took it at face value, of course, when I was a kid, but now I don't so much. And I'm going to bring up him a lot, because actually he's a big inspiration for this show, because he's someone who I don't fully understand, because I have always felt like he's a smart person, And he can be very caring, or could be very kind and very caring when he wanted to be. But he could also be a jerk, and he could also be stubborn, and he could also be, in my opinion, kind of dumb about certain things. And this presidency since 2016, and now this pandemic, is definitely one of those things where he started to show, how hateful he could be, and how ignorant he could be, and how kind of paranoid and full of fear about the world that he could be, and selfish. And of course he wouldn't see it that way. And anytime you try to bring up anything that you disagreed with him with, you were preparing for battle. And it didn't matter how small the agreement was either. That's one thing about my grandpa. He was very, very petty. If you told him he was wrong about something, then you better bring your A game because he was about to throw down. And so it was just, we ended up unfriending each other on Facebook because the internet really brought out that side of him. It really showed a lot of, he had a lot of opinions I didn't even know he had, because he was just, my grandpa, who I would see when I would visit. He would say some things, he might yell at the TV or something, but I didn't know what he thought on a day-to-day basis until Facebook. And then once I saw what he thought, that was, that's easy enough to ignore. I still have family members who I see what they think, and I'm just like, okay, I'm not going to say anything. I'll just ignore it or give it a thumbs up or something and move on. But my grandpa was very, he would come at you on your wall, about you posting things. So I couldn't share anything without him getting into a big argument with me. And it would turn into this big thing. And then, of course, if it blew up out of control, my grandma would cry, and it would become this family drama over the dumbest shit. And so he and I just unfriended each other. It was for the best. He friended me once again, like 3 years ago, and I ignored it because, honestly, ignorance was bliss. And I was like, I'm not going to ruin that again. Now when I see him, it's fine. We just, pretend we like each other when we're in person, but we really know that we both disagree with each other. And I feel bad saying all this because I don't want to talk bad about the dead, but at the same time, he was a big motivator for me to not be that way. He was, I didn't want to be like him in that way. And my dad raised me very different from him. And, I've been able to have rational discourse with my dad in a way that I could never have with my grandpa. My dad and I still get into arguments and stuff, but it's way more of a dialogue than a yelling match or a fight. Even when we disagree, we just kind of the most we do is we kind of just go like, really? That's what you really think? That's as far as our voices get. Whereas my grandpa gets so mad, and he was the type with his generation, that, you're being disrespectful. Why? Because you're wrong. I'm being disrespectful because I corrected you, And so, but there are, he did teach me a lot of things too. He was the first person to teach me how to use the computer, him and my Uncle Leon, who has also passed probably like 5-6 years ago now. I forget how long it's been, but, they started getting a computer and I was still young, and they started teaching me things. My Uncle Leon taught me how to save things to a floppy disk. And my grandpa was teaching me stuff about email. And then I had a cousin who got me into Doom, the very first Doom. And so that was kind of the beginnings of my life is all about computers now, pretty much. My career, this stuff right now, what I'm doing now is all on my computer. And so it's just, there is definite seeds throughout my life that have been planted by my grandfather. And I will miss those, and I do have some memories. And it's been a weird roller coaster of emotions this past week, because it's some sadness, but also some anger, because he was ignorant about a lot of things. But when it came to politics, it was just, wow, I didn't know you could be so hateful, But it was just more of a novelty. Like I'd ask my dad, like, oh, did Grandpa post anything interesting on Facebook this week? And my dad would tell me, But when it came to the pandemic, that's when it became serious, because this is a serious thing. People are dying from it. And he was convinced it wasn't real. It blows my mind, because I would assume that came from Trump, but Trump hasn't been saying it's not real. He just says it's from China or whatever, or maybe there is a soundbite of him saying it's real. Not real. I don't know. And for whatever reason, that's the side of the fence he fell on, that it wasn't real. He wasn't going to get tested for something that wasn't real. And he got it. He started getting pains in his back and shoulders. He started having labored breathing. And he kept it to himself for a week before it became too bad for him to hide anymore, until my grandma finally had to call an ambulance. And he went to the hospital, and he suffered. He suffered for days in the hospital, unable to breathe. They tried to keep his oxygen up, and then finally he passed, and it was rough. And it's not like the movies. It's not like you just like, goodbye, my family, and then you just pass out and you're dead. It's like you lose your dignity, I don't want to go into detail, but it wasn't a pretty picture that my dad painted for me. I didn't get to see it, but he described it for me, and it's like those final moments, you can definitely lose your dignity. And so, so he finally passed last Monday, and I have not posted on Facebook about it really much. I've just liked some of my family members' posts, and I just haven't known what to do or say. There's like some guilt mixed in with this little weird soup of emotions I have for not feeling as sad as I probably should. Maybe it'll hit me harder later. His birthday's Christmas Eve, so that's probably not going to be a really great day. But yeah, it's the first death in my family that has been close to me. Even though we didn't get along, it's something that it's definitely something I've been thinking about. It's occupied a lot of my mind. And I finally decided, you know what? This is the perfect time to finally start this show and dedicate it to him. It's one thing I can do that, dedicate this to him, because it's something that I wish maybe if I started it years ago, it's something that he would have maybe seen, a family member would have showed him or something, and maybe it would have changed his mind a little bit. I don't know. Probably not. But yeah, so it's definitely, when I thought of this show, he was the audience that I pictured in my head. He and my mom, actually, are both the audience that I pictured in my head. My mom and I get along, but she's not super educated on a lot of things, like how does science actually work? Like how does critical thinking work? She's just she's more of the endearing kind of ignorant when it comes to some of the political issues and stuff. And I don't mean ignorant in a derogatory way. Just, she's very smart when it comes to the things that are relevant in her life. But for a lot of worldly issues, she can be a little uneducated sometimes. And so, I was picturing, okay, so if I wanted to show my mom how certain things work in the world, like how maybe some political processes work, or how science works, that's the audience I was picturing in my head. I want this to be an approachable, accessible show that we can discuss things, have conversations, and it's not, not fight, not talk about people how they're stupid. I've known in my life, in my circles, kind of jokingly, I don't think anybody really thinks that I'm a hateful person or anything, but I talk all the time about how stupid people drive me crazy, and it's cathartic for me to vent that way, especially in my inner circles and stuff, and just vent about the things that I don't like in this world, and the things that I think are just asinine that's going on with government. We don't even have real leadership anymore. It's slowly democracy's eroding, and all I can do is complain about it. But this is the place where we get to actually talk about it, get down into the nitty gritty, talk about why do we think this person is ignorant and stupid? Why do we think that? So rather than use derogatory terms and just leave people with the ad hominem attack, I would rather us discuss the actual issues and get into the details. Talk about the things that people are afraid to talk about. A lot of times ignorance is perpetuated because we're afraid to hurt someone's feelings. There's an incident that just happened on Facebook the other day with a good friend that I have known for about 10 years. And she posted something ignorant on Facebook that came across really racist. And she does not think she's racist, and she's not trying to be racist, and she's a good person with good intentions, but she was very ignorant on the topic, and she came out and said, I'm a white person who doesn't have white privilege. And I don't want to just blurt out Facebook drama all over here, but it's a good example of something where a lot of people were walking on eggshells, her friends, like not saying certain things or just agreeing with her because she's a friend or whatever. And then it took one of, I think it was actually Dan for first said something and pointed it out. And then everyone kind of dogpiled, and I think it was justified. I know we were all still her friends. The only reason we even wasted our time is because we were a friend. Had it been some stranger, it just would have been an unfriend, and that would have been it. And so I took some time and talked to her and tried to reach out to her, and I think she understands the root of the issue there. But she got her feelings hurt, and I feel bad that she got her feelings hurt. But at the same time, if I have friends or anyone that I know or even people I don't know that see that and they feel marginalized by it, and everyone, the silent majority, the majority of people are silent about it, it feels like a silent approval. And so it was a perfect example of a battle that needed to be picked, I felt like, because this is just the type of ignorance that has to be highlighted, and it sucks that somebody has to get their feelings hurt. But there's times when you have to call out even your friends or your family members on that stuff. And you have to try your best to empathize. That's the whole point of white privilege, is we don't know we have it. You don't get to decide you have it or don't have it. Someone else has to tell you, hey, there's some shit I have to deal with that you don't have to deal with because you're privileged. And it doesn't mean that you have great things going on in your life. It's not like, this friend that we're talking about, she makes minimum wage and stuff like that. And so it's not like she's, got this big mansion or a bunch of money or something, but, she's definitely got privilege and doesn't realize it. And it's hard. It's really hard to recognize it, or at least listen to people when they try and tell you something. And that's what we're here for. We're trying to remove our bias and talk about issues and talk about how do we know things in a world where we're flooded with information, where stuff is coming at us left and right, and fake news this, fake news that, sensationalized media, even stuff that's true is all sensationalized and blown out of proportion. We come up with some cool new fabric that bends light through it, and then, of course, the headline is, invisibility cloak is a thing now. And it's like, no, that's not what it is. But then when you find out that's not what it is, it's like a letdown, even though it's super cool. That's a constant thing that happens. And then the same thing happens with, like, these media outlets that are like talking about making shit up about Trump that's bad. And it's like, there's so much that's bad that's not fake that why would we sensationalize or make it up? It just looks awful when you find out that, like, what was the one? It said the moon is, he said something like the moon is part of Mars or something like that. And everyone took that literally. He's like, we want to go to Mars. And of course the moon is part of that. It was how he worded it. When I actually looked up the quote, I was like, he clearly is talking about the thing we've talked about before, where if we get a moon base or something, we can use that as a jumping off point, as kind of a launching pad for future missions to Mars. Like, the context mattered there, and that's clearly what he meant. But of course, we blew it all out of proportion and talked, oh, he's so stupid, he thinks the moon's part of Mars. He is stupid, but that's not an example. It's like,
I mean, he could have worded it better.
Well, and it's not like he's talking about an actual plan we have either. He just he's like a gnat that goes from one light to the other when he's talking. So it's still dumb, but I feel like we blow things up and sensationalize it when we don't even need to. It's like everyone jokes satire is dead, and that's why. But I think that's it for my monologue. I just wanted to dedicate this to my grandpa, Franklin Ray Ford. I think that it would have been something that, if he was open-minded to it, might help change his mind. And even if it didn't, he probably would have had some arguments with me that would have been enlightening. Even if I disagreed with them, it would have caused me to think and would have made the show better. So in that way, in a roundabout way, he was a force in my life that made me think and shaped who I am today, even if it wasn't always the most positive experience. And with that, I thank you guys for letting me monologue a bit. Sorry for getting a little choked up. It's like I've been avoiding talking about it. And so, but yeah, I just want to let my family members and everybody who might happen to be watching this know that I do care. And I'm mostly sad for everyone else who's sad, because I'm just kind of detached from this kind of stuff. And like I said, it might hit me later, but I do feel really bad for my sister, who it hit really, really hard. I think she didn't expect it to hit her so hard, and she's just been struggling with it. And of course, my dad's been struggling with it too, and my grandma most of all, who was his wife. So, yeah. Anyway, I apologize for hogging the time. We'll go ahead and...
This is your podcast.
It's our podcast. I want it to be ours. I just wanted to...
Okay, but really quick, can we back it up to the whole learning about computers thing? What is a floppy disk?
Do you really not know?
Really?
Or are you just trolling me?
I think she's trolling us.
It's a save icon.
Oh, okay, that's what I thought. That's what I thought. It's not like an actual disc, though, right? Like, they're not physical things?
What? No, they're physical things. They were.
Well,
yeah. Just Google a floppy disk and you'll find a picture of it. But that's what the save icon is based off of, is the physical disk. It was a square plastic disc. I feel like you're just gassing me up right now, but in case you're not, it's a square plastic disc. It had a little metal slider. Okay.
I just wanted to see how far you guys are.
Well, if you're genuinely ignorant, that's what we're here for. We'll educate you. And that's the other thing I should bring up about this show. The whole point of this show is we're going to talk about why evidence matters and why you need to be open to changing your mind on issues. It's just we're going to talk about how you change your mind. It's not, you don't just believe everything that someone tells you. Obviously, there's a certain threshold of evidence that needs to be met before you would change your mind on an issue. And so when people talk about, oh, you're just closed-minded, it's like, well, no, I've just heard these same arguments over and over again, and I have yet to hear a compelling reason why I should change my mind. And if someone can convince me using those same standards of evidence or logic and reason, then great. Let's go there. But there's certain topics, let's say evolution, for example, where there is such a mountain of evidence and science behind it that for you to change my mind means you would have to change the scientific consensus. You would have to disprove the mountains of evidence, DNA evidence especially, geographical evidence, and just tons of stuff that evolution has predictive power about. And you would have to topple all that in order to change my mind. So when you tell me that you don't believe in it, and then you tell me I'm closed-minded, it just means that you are largely ignorant of the issue as a whole, and I don't really have time to spend with you unless you want to be educated on the topic. And there's some questions we're not going to know the answers to either. I don't know is a perfectly acceptable thing. And so we're not going to take the time on the show to go look up all the answers, probably, especially for complex issues, but we will let you know when we feel like we don't have an answer, and we'll try to point you to resources. Sorry, I cut you off, Clark.
That actually that brings up the point I was going to make perfectly, which is that because I don't know is an acceptable answer, also that means that on this show the term ignorant is not used in a derogatory manner.
Correct.
Ignorance is not a problem.
Yes, when I talk about my mom being
ignorance is just lack of knowledge.
Yeah, and that's a good
right.
A very good point to bring up, because when I say my mom's ignorant, she might be like, "What? No, I'm not." But it's like, it's kind of just a jokey thing that my mom and I have going on when we talk about stuff, and she'll say something and I'll correct her and then we laugh about it or whatever. It's not derogatory at all. If she was saying things that were wrong with authority and then getting mad when I try to tell her she's wrong, that would be different. That's willful ignorance, and that's
right.
Getting close to the stupidity threshold.
So yes, Mom, if you're watching this, you are not dumb.
No, and I'm not. I'm never intending to insult anyone here, and we'll do a whole episode. I have a little spiel about benefit of the doubt that I think is lost on this day and age, because I think a lot of people
100%.
Things get taken the wrong way, almost on purpose. You did not mute. You thought you muted, but you turned your video off instead.
You turned your video off and
Yep. Well, good thing we can edit that shit. But, I apologize for interrupting your point.
It's staying forever. Staying forever.
Yeah, I almost don't want to remove that.
To your point, though, benefit of the doubt has been removed because I think we're all at a day and age where we take benefit of the doubt out of the equation because people have access to the internet. So we're kind of just like, oh, well, you should have done, the research that I did because we all have access to Google and, stuff like that. And so I do feel like benefit of the doubt has been removed, mostly on the millennials part because we, grown up with free access to freaking Google
Right.
to, look up anything.
And benefit of the doubt requires, it's like a lot of the times when you think someone's saying one thing, you just lack context or something. If you think they're being mean, really you're just talking. There's so many internet arguments where the two people are just talking past each other. It's like
100%.
It happens all the time. The Twitter, especially, because it's like 140 character little thought bites.
Yep.
And they're just like tweeting past each other, and it's like, you guys aren't even talking about the same thing, or you're agreeing with each other but arguing about it.
Yeah, you're agreeing on the exact same topic. Yep.
By the way, your camera's still off, Cloak, in case you didn't know. So let's go ahead, and I have I should pull it up on my other computer here, but I have a little note for everything I wanted to talk about today, and I wanted to just do a high level overview of certain things. Where is it here? There we go. And I think the first thing I wanted to talk about is critical thinking, and I think what we'll do is we'll go around the room and I'll just ask you guys, Dan, what does critical thinking mean to you? When I talk about critical thinking, what does that conjure in your head?
For me, I think it's about being able to objectively look at a topic. And you need to one of the number one things I find is accepting that there are people who have a viewpoint of this topic that you've never considered before. And you need to be able to consider it from that viewpoint.
So
but sometimes that's not
going in
possible.
with an opinion without enough information.
Right. And of course, sometimes that's not always possible. But if you can't, from their viewpoint, you still need to listen to them and see if you can figure out why they think it's that way.
Absolutely. So trying to understand someone else's perspective instead of just dismissing them.
Right.
Because it doesn't jive with your current perspective. Makes perfect sense.
Right.
What about you, Dakota? When I talk about critical thinking, what does it make you think of?
It makes me think of a few different things. A fact-checking, definitely. Basically having a subject or topic being brought to you, regardless of your own opinion about it, and just doing quote-unquote, unbiased research as you can on it. And pull from different media outlets, especially if it's in politics, pull from, super red politics, or news sites, stuff like that, pull from super blue ones, and, get all of the perspectives that you can in order to form your own opinion on it.
I like that you use the word unbiased.
Just being open. Yeah, well, you have to go in unbiased, or else you already know what your belief is. So you're just going to do research that's basically confirming your bias, confirmation bias. You're just going to find news outlets or articles that confirm what your belief is. You're not going to find other ones that may challenge that belief.
Absolutely. And it's even worse than that, because not only are you biased when you put in a search and you click the links that sound like they're going to confirm what you want to hear, but Google is biased based on your data. Google will take everything it knows about you and offer what it thinks you want to see. And so we live in a world that becomes sort of an echo chamber in lots of different ways, and that's definitely one of them. You put a search into Google about vaccines, for example. Well, if you've just spent the last, 3 days looking up vaccines and Googling anti-vax claims and stuff like that, well, Google might prioritize anti-vaccination blogs or something to that effect, And the one thing we're going to talk a lot about is how to figure out what is true, what truth is, and how do we tell the difference? Because that is one thing that even people who think that they are trying to be unbiased and do their due diligence and research a topic, they don't realize how that's just not good enough. A lot of the time, there are steps that we have to take, and there's a certain understanding we have to have as we look at all that data in order to actually figure out what the truth is given a specific question. And so, unbiased analysis. We have to be able to look at all the data, preferably as much data as we can, As humans, that's a little hard. We can do all sorts of data analysis and statistical analysis and stuff like that, and form conclusions based off of those types of things. But the more data points we have, the clearer picture, ideally, we can get on a topic. It's just hard to say what is factual evidence. I think the layperson has a hard time understanding that. A blog that talks about their personal experiences sounds like factual evidence, but personal experiences are weak evidence. There's
so much psychology backing that too.
The lines are even blurred online, because you'll CNN.com, the CNN domain hosts blogs as well.
Yeah.
Well, in personal accounts, the psychology behind it, two people can experience the exact same thing and come out of it with a completely different perception of what just happened.
Mm-hmm.
So you looking at a camera can see that, these two people are viewing the same thing, but their police reports are completely bass backwards.
And then the opposite can happen, where they experience something mundane, but they, as a group, especially the more people you add, the social pressure starts to make all the stories conform. That's what a lot of these alien abduction stories happen that way. Where
100%.
It's like, oh well, there's 100 accounts of this event, and all these facts line up, and it's like, and I'm not saying you can't throw that out outright, but you do have to be very skeptical when you're looking at that kind of stuff, because the groupthink, really comes into play there, and people don't want to be the deviation. I had a fun little experiment. Dan's gonna roll his eyes a little bit, because it happened in DARE in 6th grade. Which DARE, we can have a whole episode about how messed up. DARE
we can
is.
have a whole episode about.
But I did like the one thing we did in class once, where they sent a bunch of us outside. They sent me and I think 3 or 4 other kids outside of the classroom. They brought us in after 5-10 minutes. It felt like an eternity. We were just sitting there. We didn't know what was going on. We get in there, and up on the board is a circle, a square, and a triangle. And in order, there's some kids already in line up at the front of the room that were already inside the classroom. And the officer, this whole thing, the whole point they were trying to make is stupid, but this whole experiment is interesting in a different perspective, and I'll tell you about that after. But the officer is like, "What do you see up on the board?" to the first kid, and they're like, "A star, a moon, and a hexagon or something like that." And all of us who were outside were confused, because we clearly see a circle, a square, and a triangle. And then he gets a treat, and he gets to go sit down. And then the next kid, same thing. He says a star, a moon, and a hexagon, and he gets a treat, and he gets to sit down. And then the first of the kids from outside, I was the last one, it goes up, and he's like, "What do you see on the board?" "A star?" Question mark, and he's like, "Okay." And then he's like, "And a moon?" "Okay." And then he's finally like, "Okay, and a hexagon." And he gets a treat, and he goes to go sit down. And then the next kid, the same thing. And I found this interesting, because I was always a stubborn kid. I didn't have a lot of friends. And so I didn't know why I wasn't going to conform. I didn't have a reason. I wasn't making a statement, but I just wasn't going to say the wrong answer.
You can't do what you tell me.
Yeah, and so I got up there, and I was like, I see a circle, square, and a triangle, or whatever it was. Whatever was actually on the board. And he's like, "Are you sure?" "Yeah, I'm sure." And he's like, "You're sure? You get one more chance." And I thought about it for a minute, because I wanted, it was like a candy bar or something. It was like a king size candy bar. So it's something that we wanted as 6th graders. Yeah.
Yeah.
And finally I was like, "Okay, I see a star." And he's like, "Okay." And I was like, and a moon. And he's like, "Okay." And then I was like, "And a triangle." And he's like, "No." And then this went on for like a minute of him trying to convince me to go along, and I just wouldn't. And so finally, he's like, "Well, you win." He's like, "You're the first one I've done this with that you win." And so he gave me a 2-liter and a bag full of candy. And
damn.
The whole point he was trying to make was to not conform with your friends. and do what your friends
Right.
do, you know. So the message,
Peer pressure.
yeah, the peer pressure thing. It was the peer pressure thing,
Yeah.
and it was all about drugs, of course. But I thought it was interesting because it was really tempting. I saw everyone get a king size candy bar, you know, like, and the
Right.
same thing happens with social media. So likes and upvotes and stuff. Those are like dopamine hits. They're little mini dopamine hits. It's like you post something and you want those, and if you don't get them, it's like, well, f all you guys too. Oh, excuse me, I don't want to cuss on this show because I'll have to bleep it out. But you know, it's just like it can be like almost a depressing moment, and so I've tried to divorce myself a little bit from social media and engage in more personal interactions because a lot of times people are just busy, you know. They just, or Facebook doesn't prioritize my post, and no one saw it for no fault of anyone's own. And so there's just like lots of little things like that where our interactions with people really affect us, and we're very biased, and we don't even recognize it, you know, a lot of the time. But yeah, critical thinking. It's a complex topic because it can mean different things in different contexts. But really, it just means a sharp focus on the truth. And let's talk about truth for a minute. This is an interesting discussion Dakota and I have had. Objective truth versus personal truth. What does personal truth mean to you, Dan?
You know, I don't know that I've really thought about that.
Do you think something can be true just for you?
Oh, I mean, as far as that, there are certain things that can be, yes, but typically the things that are personally true are like psychology aspects, not... There's nothing that I can point to evidence in the world, you know, and go, well, this is why. No, it's just like I feel this way, so it's personally true.
Okay. So, like, it's personally true that you love someone.
Yes, it's personally true that you love someone.
But you couldn't prove it to me.
You know,
you couldn't prove to me that you love someone with any sort of empirical evidence or anything, right?
I mean, I suppose to some degree you can when you get into love languages, and if you were to ask the person that I tell you that I love whether I express my love in those ways, then yes.
Personal account.
But
so all we would have is experience.
Right. All you'd have is that would be
anecdotal evidence.
Yeah, anecdotal evidence, even from the other person. So
okay, and so same for you, Dakota. Same answer.
Yes.
Do you think that other things besides like nebulous concepts like love can be true for you? Like, do you think that you could believe in something that like physically exists and that makes it true for you? Sorry, I'm kind of leading you with the questions.
I know where you're leading me. I'm just not sure how to pose my belief.
How about this? Give me an example of something that you think is true for just you, or true for you, maybe true for other people or not, but that's irrelevant.
I do believe that there is certain things that we cannot understand in the metaphysical world.
Metaphysical world.
So just like,
okay.
Yeah, like divine. I mean, whether it's divinity, whether it's just, you know, just stuff that we have really no like physical evidence of, but it's feelings or a culmination of things that makes you personally believe that they're true, and then you also get the confirmation bias from other people who, you know, quote unquote, have the same feelings and stuff.
Okay. So can you give us an example of something that is true about the metaphysical world, or that you think is true?
I think that certain materials, whether it's like rocks or crystals, quote unquote, they're just fancy rocks. I believe that they can portray specific emotions to you.
Okay.
Like, or bring those out, if that makes sense. So like, I know a lot of people, I mean, outside of like the metaphysical world, they do this with children a lot. They'll give them like worry stones.
Okay.
Which is basically just, you know, a thing that you can focus on, something that little kids can focus on when they are feeling anxious or fearful or something like that. And it, quote unquote, takes it away. I think it's more therapeutic.
Okay.
But
so it sounds to me though
it's
like
not something that's anything that you can prove, but with, you know,
so do you think there's more, like, so when you say metaphysical, what do you mean by the word metaphysical? Do you think it's something that's tangibly real?
Yes and no. Certain aspects of it are, but metaphysical is like tarot cards or deities, or, you know, believing that the universe is quote unquote a celestial being that, tells us things, whether or not there's a God or stuff like that. Just, things like that. I guess is what I
Have
mean
you
by
ever heard of
metaphysical.
two metaphysical claims that contradict each other?
Oh, all the time.
And when two people disagree on those beliefs, what do they end up doing? Like, do they argue about it, or is there a way to tell them apart or figure out which one of them is right? Or
That's where you get into the personal experience or like personal truths,
okay,
because it's not something that's actually tangible for everyone. Sure, there could be two people that have the same feelings, but there's also two other people who have the opposite or, a different feeling about it.
okay,
So it's not something that you can actually argue about
okay.
in, like a debate fashion.
So the way I've looked at a lot of this kind of stuff, and obviously I don't know all the details about whatever metaphysical beliefs that you or people are into, but I know that there are a lot of people who talk about different aspects of a god, for example. Oh, he's all-knowing, he's all-powerful. Like they talk all about these aspects of a god, but they're jumping one step too far ahead. The first thing we have to decide is whether there is a god and which god it is, before we can talk about aspects of it. So a lot of people start talking about aspects of something they don't actually even know exists or is real or can't show, and then so that's what happens is they start forming their own different opinions, but it's all based on one thing that's already only subjectively true or personally true for them. So it's like you can't prove that God exists, and therefore you can't prove all these other little things either. And so, like you said, every person has their own individual idea of what's true. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to talk a little bit today about objective truth versus personal truth, because I feel like I understand where a lot of people are coming from there. I'll never truly understand. Like, so for example, you say rocks evoke emotions. I could understand that certain rocks or gems or crystals or whatever trigger emotions in you as a psychological response, not as any sort of physical property of the actual rock, right? Because from my perspective, those are just molecules arranged in a certain formation to create some type of chemical, in this case, a rock, So like that's it, and then that triggers something in you. Or like my dad has this belief that there's energy everywhere that connects us, and the universe will give you things if you think about it hard enough, kind of a thing. It's like, if you've ever seen The Secret, it's like the power of positive thinking and that kind of stuff. And I totally see the power of positive thinking. When I'm in a good mood, even something bad that happens that day, I'll twist it. I'll find the silver lining. I'll be having a crappy day, but I found a good parking spot. It's like I'm biased towards seeing things more positively. If I'm having a bad day, someone could pay for my Starbucks order in front of me, and it still might not fix my bad day. So it's like, even though something demonstrably good happened, I'm biased towards seeing the negative. And so if you're always focused on the negative, you see more of that. And so I can see that. But, a lot of people, like my dad included, think that there's actually some physical thing out there. Problem is, for someone like me, I have high standards of evidence before I would actually believe in something. I'm not saying they're wrong, because I can't prove them wrong, just like they can't seem to prove to me that it exists. But before I will believe it, just like they believe it, I would have to have more evidence. And I think we all three of us listened to a podcast called The Atheist Experience with the host Matt Dillahunty there. He was quite abrasive. He's actually my inspiration for how not to be on a show, because I don't think he accomplishes much.
That's the understatement of this recording.
Yeah, I mean, I think he does accomplish. I think he got me to come around, for example, because I was divorced from the emotion.
I think he does a great job. I just think that the more time the show goes on that he's the host, it gets at him a lot. And so he starts to lose that ability to, have conversations like this.
He loses patience. The benefit of the doubt conversation is lost on him, I think. Because 100%. He will take people very literally when they say something when it's clear they didn't mean what he's getting upset about. But we don't need to sit here and bash another host. He has lots of great points. I love watching him debate. Those settings are awesome. Yeah. I really enjoy a lot of the things he says, and one of those things that he points out a lot is I lost my train of thought. So objective truth. This is where I really wanted to go. What does objective truth mean to you, Dan?
So Objective truth would be the stuff that you can absolutely prove because it happens the same way every time, like across the board.
Okay.
For instance, I can prove to you that vinegar and baking soda have a chemical reaction.
Yes.
Because every single time that I put pure vinegar and pure baking soda together, they do the thing.
Oh, I remember what I was going to say now, because it's relevant to what you just said.
Oh.
Matt always talks about how if you have a baseball behind your back, and I tell you, I have a baseball behind my back. If you say, prove it, I'll be like, okay, here's a baseball. But if you ask me to prove it, and I just say, well, I just have faith that there's a baseball behind my back, and like that should be enough to convince you. That's how a lot of those arguments sound to somebody who doesn't actually see the same baseball. That person could actually have a baseball in their hand. They could know for a fact that they have a baseball, but they can't convince me of that without giving me some sort of objective evidence. So I always thought that was a good little way to highlight that. Like you can, if you have an actual piece of evidence, you would just show it. Why wouldn't you? Faith is always a fallback answer when you don't have something objective.
Right.
So yeah, perfect example. You can mix baking soda and vinegar, and you get the same reaction every time. That's a really good example. And that's what somebody would think of as typical science, right? You mix two chemicals together, you get a reaction, and that's
very basic level science. So this happens every time, therefore that must be true. It's literally never happened any other way, unless, the baking soda was wet already. So it therefore wasn't pure baking soda.
Right.
Well, now we know what the anomaly was.
And there you go. And anomalies are great in science because it's like, okay, this reaction happens this way all the time unless. Well, let's find out what's going on with the unless. Those are opportunities to explore. So when people are talking about like scientists don't like being proven wrong, that's like literally the opposite. Showing that something doesn't happen the way you expected is kind of exciting to a good scientist anyway.
Right.
Not one who's trying to prove a foregone conclusion.
It's actually, I like the statement, the best science always happens, not with the phrase eureka, but with the phrase, that's funny.
Yeah. What the WTF is happening at you there? Yeah. What about you, Dakota? What does objective truth mean to you?
Oh, basically everything you guys have said.
Okay. So one of the examples I like to point out a lot with objective truth versus subjective truth is when you see color. I know we've had this conversation before, but let's say we both look at a banana and we see yellow, right? My dad is the one actually that I used to have this with. He's like, what if like this is totally going to sound like he's high or something, but this was just my dad. He's like, what if you just see stars? Like that's what you see. And I see, something totally different from what you see. He's like, and he would like pose that as like, kind of like how we just truly don't know anything and everything's subjective. And I was like, well, yeah, but we can both walk 3 feet this direction and pick up this object, and we can interact with it the same way. And that's objectively true between the two of us, no matter what our brain is perceiving as what we're seeing. And the same thing with, like, if you look at a banana and you see what I would see as orange, and I see what you would see as blue, Dan, and then,
right.
Like we could all see something totally different because our brain is interpreting it. But we would all point at the banana and say yellow. Even if we all saw something different, it's consistently different, right? So I would always see that orange color, or that blue color or whatever. It's just that I would think of it as yellow because that's what my brain has decided to create for that frequency of light that's intercepting that my eyes are intercepting and turning into signals that my brain can interpret. And it's a consistent stimuli that is always the same. And so I always interpret it the same way. Even if I interpret it different than you also have a consistent stimuli that you interpret the same way for you, right? So we can both look at the same thing and see the same thing objectively, even though you could never prove that we actually might have a different subjective experience of it. And so I thought that was
right.
a good highlighter of the difference between objective and subjective. Because yes, there are lots of things that I can't tell you what it's like for me to love someone. All I can do is hope that you also, as a human, experience the emotion of love, and that it's somewhat similar. It's similarly stimulating to the point, where we can agree that it's something that is true for each of us, but it's not something I can show you on a calculator of here's all the math about why I love someone. All we can do is, we have multiple data points, 3 humans, we all love someone, and we can examine how our brains are firing when that's happening and what that looks like, what the chemicals in our brain look like, and that's it. But we'll never experience the same subjective thing that another person experiences, at least not anytime soon. And so, for me, that's where the objective truth is what we have to get to. And I feel like that's kind of like what, throughout history, that's how science was born. Like, we got to just pull apart things and figure out what's true between us. Let's get rid of the stuff that we differ on and focus on only the objective facts. And that's exactly what science does. Because science is, a lot of people think that you put forth a theory in science and then you try to prove it right. Like, oh, Einstein's just like, well, I think that, time is relative, and I'm just going to go prove that right. And here's all the ways I can prove it right. But that's not the way it works. You come up with an idea of, I think this is how the universe might work, and then you try to prove it wrong. Because when you do an experiment, you are trying to poke a hole in your theory. Because as soon as you poke one hole, your theory is no longer as strong, nearly as strong as it was before.
Right.
And usually it's, totally false. And so it's like Einstein.
Or you just adopt if there's certain aspects that are wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like that happens a lot. Like even Einstein has, what was it called? There's some constant that he introduced into one of his equations to make it work. And it's just made up. He just made up some number to stick it in there to balance it out. I forget what it's called. But yeah, because he didn't want to believe that the universe was expanding or something like that. He thought it was eternal or something to that effect. I might be getting details wrong, but the point is he introduced some sort of cosmological constant that he just pulled out of his butt to make it work. And it was his bias. He was brilliant, but he still had bias and he still was resistant to someone poking a hole in his idea. And only when someone, finally other scientists are like, no, actually this dude's right. You're wrong about this, then it changes. So it's like scientists aren't perfect, but the methodology of science, the whole point of it is to poke holes in everything, examine it, come up with ideas for how it might work, and then try to prove it wrong. And only when it doesn't get proven wrong over and over and over again does it become a stronger idea. I think a lot of people misunderstand that. They think some scientist just has a pet idea and they try to prove it right. And, if the scientist is working for some big corporation, then clearly he's just biased and trying to prove something right. And that does happen. There are scientists who have agendas, lots of them, and they get paid to have agendas.
Typically, when science has an agenda, though, it's in how you interpret the data, not in the actual experiment itself.
Right.
Yep, because the bias doesn't come from the objective facts about the universe. The bias comes from us.
Whatever they did is going to happen the same way every time, most likely.
Yeah. And for complex issues, it becomes even harder, especially ones where in order to understand anything, you have to gather a bunch of data, especially if it's like trials, like human trials for certain drugs and stuff like that, where the variables are so many. There's just insurmountable variables. And that's like with these vaccines, that it basically saved humanity from having to constantly be like this past 8 months has been, or 6 months, whatever it's been now. I don't know. Time stopped for me. You can see I'm in the nexus of time right now. You can see my background.
Yeah. You're in Doctor Strange's green portal.
Yeah, it's now we're coming up with this vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine, and which we'll have a whole episode about. I actually want to make probably our next episode about COVID. Just get out of the way.
If we're doing that, we need to see what we can get from Doc about that.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yes.
That he's an epidemiologist,
Literally
working on the front lines of this. That's why he's working 12 to 16-hour days right now.
Oh wow, yeah, that'd be great. I would love to have his input. But
yeah,
we throw him in here.
We could get an actual expert on the show, awesome, as opposed to just
get him in here right now. Just call him.
But the point that I was trying to make was that vaccines are born out of constant trying to make some. We discovered something about our bodies that we create antibodies, but a lot of diseases kill us before the antibodies can accumulate to a significant enough degree to fight whatever's ailing you. And so we figured out how to trick our bodies into creating those ahead of time before you actually have the real thing. And and that then when you do get it, your body's already ready to go. It's already got the exact blueprint that it needs to create the exact right antibodies. And that was born out of a lot of science, a lot of medical science that, when we finally created the first vaccine, it was amazing. My in-laws talk about constantly how, in their day that polio and stuff like that was a big deal. And so they're kind of incredulous that one of their children is very anti-vax and just refuses to understand any of the science behind it. And it's ironic to me because these people who are ignorant of stuff like that, when they do come up with an idea that science or a lot of other people have thought of, they don't, because they're ignorant of the body of scientific knowledge we already have, they think they came up with a great idea. And she's like, we need to have COVID parties. We need to get everyone infected so that everyone will have antibodies, and sure, some people will die. That's like the
fucking chicken pox parties.
Right. But then the ones who survive will have antibodies, and then we'll have herd immunity.
Jesus Christ.
And they bring this up like we've never thought of it before. Like that's literally what a vaccine does, right? And so it's like that's exactly what in chickenpox parties used to make sense. Let's get all the kids together, get them all chickenpox so that they're all immune, and then that's it. They're not going to die from it, so it wasn't as morally
okay, but that works.
Questionable.
That works for chickenpox because the mortality rate is like nothing, and B, like you can't actually get it again after you've already had it. COVID has been proven that you can get it after you've already had it, and the mortality rate is absolutely ridiculous. So you're literally just killing off children.
Yeah, I'm not totally. I don't know if the science is super decided on whether you can get it again or not. It might have to be a different strain or something. I don't know the details on that.
It actually you can get the same strain again.
Oh, you can. You okay.
Doc just had to quarantine again until he got a double negative test for exposure to the same strain he already had earlier this year. Gotcha.
But yeah, it's like getting everyone together and then just letting the ones who are going to die is a really stupid idea. You're right. That chickenpox, it's not so morally questionable, but with COVID, it's definitely a no-no. We want to make sure that this thing spreads slowly so that we don't overwhelm our medical infrastructure, what little of it we have. And
well, yeah, just the whole thing is so ableist. The whole kill off the old and the disabled and sacrifice the few to save the many, when we don't even need to do that because we have the technology to save everybody. B, why are we killing off that you could use the same argument for anti-abortion as you could for COVID, and what if this disabled person cured cancer? Or, we'll save that for next episode, though.
I mean, it's hard not to. This is why, starting this show is like a way for us to dive into those topics in more detail. We live in a culture that's so fast-paced that we lack patience big time. We want everything, we want it now, and that includes waiting out a pandemic. The human history is wrought with pandemics, and we've had to survive, decades waiting for evolution to naturally solve it for us, and hopefully we survive it in the end, and we have. But yeah, we have the science now to identify the problem. We know this is a solvable problem from the moment we found out about COVID-19. Had we jumped on it ahead of time, worked with the World Health Organization, like we've tried to do in the past with leadership that actually cares.
It's been solved in New Zealand.
Yeah.
They don't have any COVID restrictions right now. They're still not allowing travel from other places.
They keep getting reinfected and they keep beating it too. Someone brings it in, They quarantine them, they take care of it. It sucks. I agree with everyone that, yes, I don't like having to wear my mask everywhere. I don't like having to quarantine at home all the time. Nobody's out here going, yes, this is the greatest thing ever. It's, if you have perspective on human history, it's not that bad. It's actually pretty easy. We get to stay home with the internet and all of the modern marvels that we have today, compared to when the Spanish flu 100 years ago, it's just a night and day difference. But the big difference is we all lack complete patience, at least in this country. We can't seem to beat it because we just can't seem to convince people to care about one another, which is ironic for a Christian country, which we'll go into another episode. Don't write me. We're not a Christian country.
That's another episode.
I just think it's funny that so many people who think we are a Christian country are so quick to not help their neighbors, and you'd think that they'd want to do everything they possibly could. Even if it wasn't, if they were right that the pandemic is fake or something, you're just being asked to wear a mask.
That's literally what I just posted in our chat, is like, we should have a quote in like the beginning of the next episode when we talk about COVID, about like, regardless if you think this is real, regardless if you think this is a big idea or a big deal, wouldn't you rather be seen as someone who honors human decency over their own...
Absolutely.
I can't remember how I worded it, but
benefit
like their
of
own
the
selfishness,
doubt.
basically.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Like, if it's a conspiracy, then the ironic part is I have a friend who's been telling me that he does that thing all the time. He like poses some dumb question and then says and one of them is like, the timing of this virus and this election is just interesting, don't you think? I don't know what he's getting at because he never actually makes a point with a period. It always ends with a but I can intuit kind of what he's getting at. But even if that was the case, like, what do you want me to do? Like, like, I'm still going to take those precautions. Right. And the other thing that cracks me up is a lot of these people that think like him, I don't know if it's him specifically, but think that the virus is a distraction from something, right? They think
100%
a distraction from some political going on, some political event, something like that. But the part that cracks me up about that is if you think it's a distraction, then just wear your mask and stop focusing on it and focus on whatever the thing you think you're supposed to be focusing on,
Right, like stop putting your energy into it and put your energy on trying to figure out what that other thing is.
When you're throwing your fit in Walmart, you're clearly distracted. Looks like it worked to me.
Exactly.
But
jeez, we could have so many spin-off episodes.
Oh, we got tons. We got the whole
conspiracy theorists, anti-vaxxers.
Let me just look at the list. We've gone off on tangents, but that's okay. Science. So one thing about science that a lot of people say is, science is your religion. That's just what you believe. That's your religion. Now I gotta bleep that too. It's okay. It's gonna take some time to get used to it. But yeah, they think science is basically just an ideology like any other, and they think that it's like, oh, I believe what God says, you believe what scientists say, and it's like, okay. The thing is, I respect what scientists say, and I weight their opinions more, especially the prominent scientists, the scientific community, the consensus. I weight that more because I understand the scientific method, which is what science is about. Science is not just an ideology, it's an ideology about a methodology, which is the scientific method. And so we'll do a whole episode on actually how to go through the scientific method, but it's pretty straightforward. You ask a question, you research, do some background research. What do we already know about this question? First of all, that's one of the most important things is like, what have humans already figured out? Because a lot of people forget that step. Like, is there stuff we already know? Has someone written a paper on this? What can we find out that we already know? And then after you've done that and you've used that to modify your hypothesis or whatever, then you formalize your okay, this is specifically how I think this works. This is my idea for how this phenomenon occurs. And then you try to test it. Basically what we talked about before, you start trying to poke holes in it. Even after all of that, you've tried to poke holes in it, you can't seem to falsify your own idea, that you got to put your idea, you got to publish it somehow, right? Publish it to a scientific journal of some kind or something. Just, you got to talk to people. You got to get into the community. You have to find out what who has the expertise to be able to understand what you're trying to tell them. And then you have to have them verify it. They have to be able to repeat your results. And that's one of the most important parts about the scientific method is repetition. Being able to do the same thing over and over. Mixing the vinegar and the baking soda. You can do it over and over and over again, and it will always be the same result unless there's some other variable. The scientific method is a very straightforward procedure, fits our reality that we experience. And it takes all the objective truths that we know. We know that gravity is a thing. Even if you don't understand how it works, we know exactly the rate at which things will fall. If we drop them, we can measure it. Physics tells us what the arc of a baseball will look like if you throw it against the wind and the wind is going this fast and this is how hard you threw it. You can predict the arc and you can predict exactly where the baseball will land if you have all the variables. And that's science. Science has predictive power, which is funny because religions are oftentimes always touting about predictive power. Like, there's a prediction that this will come true, and all these things will come true, and they're always, nebulous enough that it can fit numerous situations. I was watching Deep Space Nine the other day, and there's an episode where there's some ancient Bajoran prediction, and it comes true like 3 times in that episode based on different ways they interpret it. It's just like, when you're looking for things and you're anomaly hunting, which is what I call it, when you're looking for something, you confirm it all the time. It's like that whole thing, like pray until something happens. Well, if I pray all the time and my criteria is I got to keep praying until something happens, anything could happen and I might think my prayer is answered, Like, if I pray for 3 months straight and then all of a sudden a baseball comes flying through my window, that's something. Something happened that was out of the ordinary. That might be the thing, It's just like it just depends on the context of everything. What are you asking for? What are you praying for? What are you looking for in life?
That baseball was your sign from the guy who wouldn't show you earlier.
Yeah, he had faith in the baseball and it came through my window.
Yeah.
It was karma.
Or, like, you just need to switch the game from private to public a few times and you'll get more imposters.
I love that. Confirmation bias incarnate. And you know what's funny about that situation, Dakota? You could be right.
What?
You could be right. I can't prove you wrong.
I know, but
when you're in Among Us...
I can't prove that I'm right, though.
So, I don't know if you're aware of this, Stan, but when we're in Among Us, we're in a lobby, and we're waiting forever for someone to join our game. Dakota is obsessed with making it private and then open again. Private and open again. Because she thinks that she's doing something to affect it, to get people in faster. And every time she does it, and then 5 seconds later someone joins, she's like, see? It's like the perfect example of confirmation bias. But that's the thing, though. I'm skeptical, so my default position is that it's not doing anything. But I wouldn't be surprised if somehow we looked at the code, we looked at the network infrastructure, and we found out that every time you open it up, it goes to the top of some queue or something, and then you're right.
Right.
But the problem is
But that's the thing. It's one of those you can't prove it wrong, and I can't prove it right.
But we could. That's the thing. This is an objective.
With access.
I don't have access to that, though.
No, even just off of our experiences, we could at least gather enough data to draw some conclusions, right?
Data for sure.
We could sit there and measure it. I could start a lobby, you could start a lobby, and you could do your technique, and we could measure how long it takes, how many average people come through. We could do this for a week, and we'd have some pretty good data just suggesting whether there's a difference or not. That would be the beginning of finding an anomaly there, and that would be objective truth. And that's why I like that example, because it's a perfect example of something that, even without being able to peek behind the curtain, which, with a source code we could, but when it comes to supernatural claims or something, or metaphysical claims, you can't. But if you can repeat something over and over again, you can measure it, and we could totally determine whether or not there's a difference. Same thing with like people who think pushing the button to cross the street on the crosswalk over and over again is going to change how fast it turns so that they can cross the street. It
does. It's a minimum of 3 pushes.
I do it too. I'll sit there and hit it. Come on. But that's where like our emotions and our bias come in, because we could be doing something for no reason at all, just because like, well, even if it's not helping, it could be helping, so I'm going to do it, and sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it can be a bad thing. It just depends on what it is. In the case of Among Us, it's innocuous. Like, it doesn't really matter. Although maybe you're decreasing the amount of chances people can join by nanoseconds every time you make it private.
Maybe I'm hindering our success.
Yeah. So we're coming up on an hour. I think 2 hours is going to be my limit. Actually, we passed an hour, so we can talk about anything at this point. I have some things we can talk about, but do you guys have? I want to give you guys a chance to bring up anything that sounds interesting or related to just high-level skepticism, science, questions that you want to ask us.
Not off the top of my head. I actually expected it would take us longer to get through these topics.
Well, there's still more. If you guys don't have anything, I have plenty. Trust me.
I was just gonna say, like, we didn't go through the whole list.
No, we didn't. I'm just looking here to make sure. Let's talk about standards of evidence then, if you guys don't have anything else you want to tangent on. Evidence is pretty much anything that, leads you to a conclusion or leads you to a suspicion of something. So like if I tell you a story about my alien abduction, that's evidence because I told you a first-hand account of something. But the difference is it's a different kind of evidence. It's anecdotal evidence. And if somebody is just relaying an account to you, I have this personal experience, that's not enough to convince. So I like to use the analogy that this is a very popular one, so it's not like I came up with it or anything, but like in a court of law, I couldn't prove that I went to the park yesterday by sitting up in the stand and saying so. If this was something that had to be proven in order to determine someone's guilt or something like that,
their alibi, yeah.
If whether or not I went to the park yesterday actually mattered to the point that we had to prove that it was right to a certain degree of confidence, then my just saying so isn't enough. I would need people to vouch for me. We need more anecdotal evidence. We need other people's anecdotal eyewitness accounts of me being at the park. We need my wife saying I wasn't here at the specific time because I went to the park. We need, there's all sorts of stuff that needs to say, or obviously the more likely scenario would be like, I wasn't at the park and I need to prove I wasn't because some murder happened in the park or something like that. But
right.
But unless they could prove that I was there, they can't, prove me guilty. But basically, standards of evidence matters because if you find my DNA at the park and you find my jacket at the park and you find my blood or someone else's blood on my T-shirt, that's obviously we're getting pretty close to a lot of empirical evidence that's going to convict me of some crime. And that's why it matters in a court of law because someone's life depends on it.
Are you confessing to being a serial killer on this podcast? Right now?
I didn't go to the park yesterday. I didn't want to catch the COVID.
There's no one at the park anyways.
One of the points I wanted to make was that would seem to imply that more anecdotal evidence is better, right? But there's a certain point where you cross a threshold and it's like doesn't matter anymore. And you get to the groupthink level where it's like, okay, there's tons and tons of anecdotal evidence, but now they're all playing on each other. There's all the
right.
alien abduction stories are now creating their own little ethos, and these people are playing into that narrative. It's the same thing with religion. There's a lot of stuff that people just say, well, something happens a certain way, or someone preaches to the pulpit that a certain thing about the Bible, and then they go and they teach it to their families on their family home evening or whatever they do, and then they teach it to other people, and so it becomes a thing, even though it was just something someone said, and so it takes on a life of its own. So anecdotal evidence is very untrustworthy, which is why it doesn't mean a lot in a court of law. It's additive, like someone's eyewitness testimony of something. Corroborating that with someone else's eyewitness testimony, you can find out things in their stories that match up, and that could be useful. But by themselves, it's not good enough. It's just weak anecdotal evidence. It doesn't really prove anything, and so you need something in addition to that. And so that's where we are with certain topics. Evolution, I brought this up at the top of the show, is a good example of a scientific theory that is not just evolution's just a theory. You've probably heard people say that before. It's not, though. It's theory with a capital T. In science, that's a big deal. It's a mountain of evidence that has yet to have holes poked in it. Just saying like, well, radiometric dating isn't that accurate, so the age of the Earth isn't, or like poking little holes in stuff like that. It's like, okay, but we have more than that. Like, you need to understand the body of evidence as a whole. You need to do real research, not just Google research, but you need to actually go and read textbooks on the topic. Like, how do we know the age of the Earth? What are all the methods we use? What are the error bars? How wrong are we? Like, everything is a guess in science to a certain degree. But
I mean, and a lot of it you have to look at what's the data range we're at here, because if I tell you, if I'm taking a history exam about just the history of Western civilization and I'm off by 50 years, I done screwed up.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I done screwed up.
It's all good.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm dating a rock that could be 3 billion years old and I'm off by 150,000 years,
Not a big deal.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. It's pretty good considering the age of the rock. Exactly. And you use multiple methods to corroborate the data. So as long as you find, that all these different methods of dating certain things fall within a certain range, where you can say, okay, well, the age of the Earth is at least within this range. And the error bars definitely matter. And that's another thing I think people forget is when you hear scientists talk, good scientists, or even just generally intelligent people talk, you'll realize that they hedge their bets on everything they say. They never talk with complete 100% certainty because a lot of those people know that... Sorry, what'd you say?
I said I feel attacked. I almost never make. See, I'm doing it right there. Almost never.
Almost never, yeah. Exactly.
I've left myself an out.
But that's people think of that as a weakness, though. But this is my point. I actually wrote a blog post on this once in regards to the programming world because someone asked a question on Stack Overflow. If you've never heard of Stack Overflow, it's just a Q&A site for programming code. And someone else came back and said, I think it's this and this and this, but I'm not at my computer and I can't verify it right now. And someone commented back to that answer and said, well, if you're not sure, then this isn't a very valuable answer. And oh
my gosh.
And then the guy came back and edited it to remove the uncertainty, and he made more of a certain statement. And I'm like, you literally just removed the error bars, the good information you had, because I, as somebody who's coming along that, was like, okay, well, so this guy's not sure, but I might as well try it, right? But he could be wrong, and he's even saying he could be wrong. Right. So now I have my expectations set properly. If I plug this code in and try this thing and it doesn't work, I'm not super shocked. But if now that he's edited it to answer someone else's, who's saying that it's a weak answer, and he's now made a more official answer and it's wrong, now I'm going to be mad a little more because I'm like, well, okay, well, this clearly works for this guy, but it doesn't work for me. So what's the difference here? And it's like, no, it actually didn't work for that guy. And he didn't know that it was the right answer, right. But someone got all huffy about it. And that's exactly why I feel like it's a mark of a smart person. You at least are trying not to make completely positive, 100% certain claims about stuff. And that's the problem with our Facebook friend the other day, who was making claims about, well, this warning about racism in this show that she was watching, doesn't belong here anymore. The character that it was an issue is removed, and it's like, but do you know for sure it doesn't belong there? She's making a positive statement over something really, what I would consider petty, and so it's like that's where it comes across really ignorant and really. It's like you don't actually know that, and does it matter to you? The fact that we're getting all huffy about this, meanwhile someone else is being bullied by a police officer, it's like, I'm pretty sure the scales, are not in balance here. And that's what makes us look petty. It makes us look privileged. It makes us look, because that's when we talk that way. Like, well, you don't have problems to deal with that I don't have. Everything's equal. We've defeated racism and sexism. Well, when I make a positive claim like that, it comes across very, very ignorant. And it is very ignorant, And it's like, I could say these two jobs, I could say at my job, I feel like women and men are treated pretty equally. But I don't know. And I'm not a woman, and so I could never answer that for certain. We'd have to ask a woman I work with. That's how I would hedge my bet, right? Because I could say, well, from my perspective, things look this way, but I could be wrong. And I think it's important to say that. Now, in that particular case, even saying that might still be ignorant, but you get what I'm trying to say.
Right. Well, and it brings up the point that the best source of information is always going to be an expert.
Yeah.
So, for instance, in your example, you feel like women and men are treated equally at your job, but you'll never know until you get the other perspective.
And even if I find a woman who works for the company I work for and says that she feels like everything's fair and she's treated fairly, it still doesn't mean that there's not a problem somewhere.
Right.
That someone else has.
Because then you're still looking at sample size.
Yep.
When you're looking at your data.
Exactly.
You found one woman who says this. It's much like with the right latching on to Candace Owens.
Yes.
On Twitter.
Yep.
You found one black person who says this. that doesn't make it true.
And this conversation to someone who's hardcore right-wing is going to come off as, we're just looking for reasons to be offended. Well, that very same Facebook post I keep bringing up is a good example, because she has a friend on there who's clearly very racist, and I don't have any problem calling her out on here. I'm not going to say her name, but she is without a doubt saying, oh, there's no such thing as white privilege and all this stuff. And she's speaking with some sort of authority that she doesn't have. And it's not, you can find, we're not looking for reasons to be offended. We're just trying to watch ourselves, be mindful of ourselves, so that we don't unnecessarily make someone feel like they are less than the rest of society. We don't want to make someone feel marginalized, even accidentally. And it's not even that hard. Just to keep your eyes open and make sure that you watch what you say a little bit. And still, you're still going to make mistakes. You just got to be willing to be like, oh, you're right. That I can see how that can come across a certain way. And you're also probably going to get pride and feel like, well, this is a petty, stupid thing, and get all mad about it, like our friend did. And I've done it before. I think a good example, Dan, is what did I say? I said something once. You and Bryn pointed it out, and I think it was regarding spirit animal. Yep,
as a term.
Yep, that's it. I said someone so and so was my spirit animal, and and I thought that it was like I felt like I was dogpiled on. I felt like it was petty, and I deleted it. And I was like, and then you're like, why'd you delete it? And I was like, so that's still not good enough. And I was like, this is. I felt really stupid afterwards, but it's a knee-jerk human response.
Right.
And but the more I thought about it, like, was it really that hard for me to just say, oh, you're right, I didn't realize that could be offensive, and then just move on. So I'm trying to be better about that. I do think sometimes that there are people that are looking to find reasons to be upset. One of the examples I bring up a lot is there was a kid who wore blackface to give an oral report of his hero, Martin Luther King Jr. I don't know the details on it, so maybe I'm getting it wrong a little bit here, but at least from what I read, it didn't seem like this kid deserved all the hate and vitriol that he got, because blackface, the context matters. If you're wearing blackface to idolize someone, that seems like the antithesis of the problem that we're upset about. But at the same time, you could argue that his parents let him go that way to school. There's a lot of they should have educated him on why society has such a knee-jerk reaction to that. There's a lot of nuance you could get into in issues like that. I think overall, it's just a part of it's. We don't have to go into and solve every little problem. The whole point is that we just want to be mindful, and we want to make sure that we try to be as inclusive as we can, and we're gonna screw it up, and we do all the time. But the difference is we need to be better than that after the fact. When people call it out, especially like this Facebook issue the other day, multiple people who are their friends are telling you, hey, this is pretty messed up. Like at that point, you'd hope that they would come around. And I think she still might come around on the issue. I don't, I can't say for certain, but see, I hedged my bet.
Well, yeah, you can't control what other people do or how other people will take the information that you're presenting to them, but that shouldn't stop you from at least trying to help, get stuff out, especially when it comes to LGBTQ, instances or anything to do with race. You have to be willing to basically call them out, and, however they respond is however they respond. It's not our job to beat around the bush, in order to avoid telling them that they're racist.
Yeah.
Or they're homophobic.
And I think that's the one thing we can focus on is trying to spend. So this is where the benefit of the doubt conversation, I think, would come in. This is how I tried to deal with our friend the other day, because I reached out to her privately, and I tried to practice my kindness and giving benefit of the doubt, because I just wanted to launch on the post. I instantly was like, you guys were already doing it, so I was already like in like the peer like crowd pressure mode. I'm like, yeah, I should harp on her too. Like this is pretty, and it was messed up. I'm not gonna lie. I agreed with everything you guys were saying, and I wanted to hop in there and add to it and be like, how can you sit here and double down on this when people are telling you exactly why you're wrong, and just really lay the smack down. But all it would have done is push her into a corner where she unfriended all of us. And now she's surrounded in her echo chamber again. Where she lives is a very big right-wing echo chamber. And so I instead reached out to her and did what I want this show to do, tried to educate her on the issue. Like, here's why people are upset. Like, I'm not saying that they didn't overreact maybe or something because you're a friend or whatever. I'm not accusing you guys of overreacting or anything either. But, you know, I'm just saying this is why everyone is kind of jumping on you. And this is the reason, you know, why and I explained to her how white privilege works. Like, what does the term even mean, you know? And I was like,
it doesn't mean that you get freaking discounts on college.
No.
That was one thing that she tried to tell me is because she can't check a box for college, you know, for FAFSA and get discounts. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
I know. And I'm not sure if she's modified her views at all or whatever. And it's fine. I'm still going to try to be her friend as long as she's being friendly back. And she was like, thanks for not jumping on me, you know, the way everyone else did. And so even though I'm not sure that I reread everything, and I don't feel like she was attacked that hard. But, you know, when you're on the defense, it seems like everyone's out to get you. So I understand that a little bit.
100%.
But,
well, on the opposite end of that as well, you have to, like, us as the ones who are trying to, you know, present her with evidence, we also have to self-reflect. And, you know, maybe some of us did come off very aggressive, you know, and maybe we shouldn't have. Maybe we should have, you know, changed the conversation a little bit. Like, yo, like, I know you're a friend. You don't, you know, like, this hate that, you know, are maybe even unaware of that you're spreading is completely out of character for you.
I think the important bit was that you all did it public. I think that's a good thing. I think the fact that she posted something public that was very ignorant and very, you know, very well it marginalizes a whole entire group of people. You know, it makes it like she's acting like she's speaking for white people, you know, and she can't do that. And so I felt like it was important to be called out. And so I was glad you guys did it publicly. So it gave me the opportunity to reach out privately and just try to reach her in a different way. So you guys at the same time were drawing attention to an issue, which I think needs to be called out in the public eye when stuff like that happens. Because that's where the silence comes across as a silent approval. When somebody posts something ignorant and all the comments are just her racist friends saying how right she is. And the people who disagree with her, who are also her friend, are afraid to correct her. It looks lopsided, even though there's a bunch of people that actually disagree, you know. And so I was glad that
100%.
that happened on this particular issue. And then, you know, and then also reaching out privately, I think was a smart thing to do to help her out a little bit. And she took a break from Facebook. And maybe that's what she needs to do in order to process it all and come around. I don't know. It's like, we're not here to solve a Facebook debate. It's just a good example of where and tons of people on there, you know, in the comments just talking about how, we're just looking for reasons to be offended. And I'm like, there's a lot of things on this particular person's wall that I have thought about saying stuff about. I just have never picked a battle.
100%.
I've never picked a battle
There's
until
just
now.
menial things that
she's not the only one. Family
on.
members, lots of people post stuff, and I'm just like, yeah.
They also seem to be ascribing offense, but I'm not offended. I'm explaining why somebody else would be offended.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. Exactly.
I am not.
Right, like, I don't think
it's
any
not
of
my
us...
place to be offended on someone else's behalf.
That's a very good point.
Exactly. I don't think any of us were speaking out of offense. We were all just presenting her with why she was wrong. Like, why her perspective
for instance, like, and it's why I had to be less active in a lot of the protests when I was still living in St. Louis. Because we had for lack of a better term, we had a significant issue with a bunch of white folks swooping in and being like a white Jesus, trying to be a white Jesus kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was like, well, if y'all would just do this and protest this way, and I'm like, no. No, that's not what the white people are here for at this protest.
Yeah.
Like,
where they're just show up, shut up, and help. That's
right.
it.
Show
an
up,
ally.
shut up,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna put this big ass piece of wood between the cops and you guys.
Exactly.
And that's a very good point to bring up, because it often comes across too, and a lot of right wingers will bring this up, that we're getting offended on behalf of other people, and sometimes I think that's true. You know, people are. It's like
definitely
there's a rage culture.
I ran across it today. Once again bringing up shit that happened on Facebook.
It's fine if it's a good example. Then I don't
right.
mind. It's not.
Ran across it today. A friend of mine made a joke about people on the spectrum because his wife's frontline care, so she got the vaccine really quick.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, "Oh, hey, my wife just got the vaccine. Hope she doesn't turn autistic." And I thought it was fucking hilarious. I'm on the spectrum, for the record. Those.
No, I know.
Well, I mean, this being
show.
A recorded show.
Yeah,
so.
I figured I'd let you explain that before I chevsplain it. Which is the term that Dakota has coined when I explain something out of place.
But then, like, later in the thread, there's some parents of a child, like, the parents themselves aren't on the spectrum, their child is.
Mm-hmm.
Or, like, getting all uppity about it. And I'm like, so far, the only person on the spectrum I've heard from on this is me. I could still be wrong. It's a spectrum for a reason, and there may be folks on the spectrum that don't like that joke.
Well, and even somebody who if you could measure and say they're saying, you know, about the same sort of place on that spectrum as you are, someone else might be offended still. But that's their place to say. They may have an entirely
different viewpoint, but your 5-year-old son doesn't have an opinion about this joke. I can almost guarantee that. One, because they're not on Facebook and didn't read it.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably didn't read it to them if you're getting this uppity about it.
Well, and this is also where benefit of the doubt comes in,
but at the same time...
Oh, go ahead.
At the same time, one person of a group does not speak for everyone in that group.
Right. Well, like I said, I could still be wrong, but one person of a group does not speak for everyone from a group, but I can guarantee you that a person outside that group doesn't speak for that group at all. So, like, is what I'm saying is that these parents swooped in to be offended. If another person on the spectrum swooped in to be offended, fucking all right. That is their prerogative and a valid thing.
Again, though, their child, who they are protecting from society, is, you know, being quote unquote made fun of. So I can get the perspective of the parents swooping in and trying to give a different perspective. Like, hey, you know, this might not be cool.
But that's not how they went about it. They were just like,
no, I get it. I'm just out of context the way that you're explaining.
And also,
I think
quite frankly, no offense, it's very ableist to say that they are protecting their autistic child. Like, yeah, they're protecting maybe as a child, but as a person on the spectrum, they don't need extra protection from things like that.
Can I just watch you guys?
That's not what I was saying.
Can I just watch you guys debate? I like it.
Sure, but that's not at all what I was saying. I wasn't saying that they're being protective because he has autism or that he's on the spectrum. I was saying they're protecting him because they're his parents.
But what are they protecting him from if it's something that he'll never see? Or like
he might see it. There's a ton of ableism in the world. Tons.
No, I'm saying, what are they in this one specific post? Yes, he'll see the ableism in the world. It's going to happen. What are they protecting him from by getting offended on his behalf on this post?
I was just giving you another perspective so that you're not outright just shitting on those parents.
Well, I could see. Okay, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of the parents. If I was getting upset, let's say I was having a knee-jerk reaction to this, I could see myself justifying it with, well, okay, sure, in this specific instance, maybe this particular child isn't going to understand this or see it or be affected by it. But I don't like seeing society behave this way in general, and I'm afraid that when he can understand it, that this stuff will be normalized, and that he'll see it and feel bad. Does that...
Well, I get that, but that also... I guess it would be helpful if I were to explain that even though it is probably the most harmful stereotype about autism, by and large, people on the spectrum run with the vaccine joke. And just dog on it all the time.
Yeah, I've seen that, because it's kind of like taking ownership of something, like taking a derogatory thing and then
we're taking it back
claiming
because it's the most harmful thing. So if you keep
100%.
treating it as the most harmful thing and make it taboo, I'd much rather make fun of it because it's so ridiculous from a scientific standard standpoint.
I could see that.
Than I would give it the credence of, oh, that hurts me,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, speaking of vaccines causing autism, that's a perfect example, as a tangent here, of a scientist that had an agenda. Andrew Wakefield is the one that spawned the majority of this movement, and he went in with an 100%. Agenda to prove his own the existing bias. And it sparked this whole movement of all these anti-vaxxers. And now we just can't seem to kill that exactly what you're talking about, this notion that vaccines give you autism, and that somehow that's worse than death.
Right?
Yeah.
Dan, I'd rather you be dead than be here with being on the spectrum. It's like, what?
Thanks, love you too.
That's pretty messed up, Like, if you think about it from that way, like, I would rather my son die from polio or something than exist and be on the spectrum, even if it did cause autism.
There's, for the longest time, people's only exposure to folks on the spectrum was what, Rain Man?
Yeah,
that's very true.
Yeah,
it was very taboo for a long time, and they were just like extreme cases.
Right. It's so if your only exposure is the extreme case, which, let's be completely honest, would be very, very difficult. Like I'm saying, being a parent is already difficult, and then you add being a parent of an extreme case like that.
Right.
I kind of get it. That
I do. I'm not saying that you necessarily want to inflict that on a child that wouldn't have it otherwise. But if the alternative is they might die,
and if the alternative is life in an institution,
exactly, it's quality of life. So they're saying their quality of life would be the equivalent of them being dead. So that's their justification.
Right, but of course, there's no good justification for that when you look at the actual statistics of the fact that
that's exactly
the majority of folks on the spectrum
100%
have perfectly functional's an ableist term. But
I know.
Maybe that's. I thought you were going to say the point I was going to make, but you tangented a little bit. What I was going to say was,
sorry.
No, you're fine. I just thought it's fine.
Yeah, go for it.
I was going to say, when you weigh death versus poor quality of life, and you put them together side by side, just like that, then yeah, I can see that argument. But the problem is that even if vaccines did cause autism, the statistics matter, because the autism's way over here and the death is way over here, and there's way more likely to be dead than they are to get autism, and so that offsets that comparison.
Way more likely to be dead than to have autism to a degree that it impacts quality of life that way.
Yeah,
exactly.
And that's if it was true, which it's not. So, we should be clear.
I did start to make that same point, but I did tangent.
Yeah, it sounded like you were going to do that, and then exactly. But
I absolutely was going there, and then just what? Butterfly.
It's okay. I have ADD, and I do the same shit. it's like, what was I saying? I've already lost my train of thought like 4 times tonight, which I've expected to. But yeah, that's if it's true, and then it's not. So that's another thing about science that we talked about is repetition, right? Nobody's been able to replicate Andrew Wakefield's results, and they've been able to poke a ton of holes in it. The biggest hole being that the definition of autism, of diagnoses, was expanded. And then that exactly fits his data for all these expanded cases of autism. It just so happens that it also increases at roughly the same rate as vaccination rate did. And so it's like this more inclusive definition is now, it's a correlation. It's not causation. And correlations are not necessarily directly related at all. They can be, but they're not necessarily. And in this particular case, they are not.
That reminds me of a website. Have you ever checked out Spurious Correlations?
No, I haven't.
I think you would enjoy it.
It sounds like something.
Also, the psychology of it not necessarily the psychology, but the diagnoses still has such a long way to go with stuff like that. So it's very true that he could say, certain symptoms are quote unquote autistic and, loop them into that group as well. They don't have autism, but they still fit his, his box. So he loops them into
So
his
for
report.
For instance, one of the spurious correlations, and they've laid all of these correlations out on a graph. You can see specifically how well they just do match up, but they mean absolutely nothing alongside each other.
Okay, I'm definitely going to enjoy this. You should read us a couple.
Yeah, what is that?
So U.S. spending on science, space, and technology correlates with suicides by hanging, strangulation, and suffocation. Almost perfectly.
When you have tons of data points about tons of things, that's going to happen.
Right. Why does it do that? Who the f- no? So the divorce rate in Maine almost correlates perfectly with the per capita consumption of margarine.
That's so funny.
Maybe
love that.
People getting fat.
I'm definitely
Some
gonna.
fat phobia?
I'm definitely gonna link that the next time someone makes a spurious comparison, because that happens a lot.
I'll link it in the Undoctrinate channel here.
That's awesome.
Please do.
One of my favorite spurious correlations. Have you ever been to the website that's it's a warning about all the dihydrogen monoxide?
I have. Yes.
That one's great because Dakota, do you know what dihydrogen monoxide is?
No.
It's a major component.
No.
It's a major component in acid rain, and it's also in like pretty much all the food we eat. It's water. And that the whole page was all about how it's a major component in acid rain. It's in the food you eat. It's in all these chemicals. It's like you need to watch out for dihydrogen monoxide.
It's dumped into rivers, like.
Yeah. And it's perfect. It's a perfect highlight of all the people that are like, look at all these ingredients that I don't understand, all the chemicals and all the processed things. And it's like, okay, but if you actually understood what those are, then sure, maybe you can point out something that's not necessarily good for you, but you'd have to actually use like real evidence and like real domain knowledge about what you're talking about to make your point, right? It can't just sound complicated. That's not good enough. And that's what the dihydrogen monoxide thing does.
Something I brought up to, or I think it was just a meme that I read to Dakota on chat while we were waiting for you to come back. But it was just like, well, I don't know what's in the vaccine. You don't know what's in Tylenol. Shut up.
Yeah, you probably don't know what's in a lot of things. There was another good one that was going around a couple of years ago. It was like if I put and they list all the chemicals in a vaccine. If I inject that into someone, I'd be a criminal. But when a doctor does it, they're a hero or whatever. And I'm like, if you did it, you'd probably kill yourself. It's like if you took a bunch of shit and just injected it into your veins, you'd probably like at least put yourself in the hospital. Yeah, because you don't understand what you're doing.
Oh my gosh.
It's like you wouldn't like these people wouldn't even be able to figure out what someone's blood type was, let alone which ones are compatible and which ones aren't, all on their own. They have to be told that from people who have the expertise. And that's why that's what being a doctor is about. Is understanding that stuff. Oh no.
Why did I open this?
Do you got to get a couple off your chest? Go for it.
Okay. The number of people who drowned by falling into a swimming pool correlates with films Nicolas Cage appeared in.
And really what that means is that right as Nicolas Cage was becoming a prolific actor, that like the middle class was a thing for a moment and lots of people had swimming pools or access. But
yes. But also,
so maybe when we have a good middle class, that our taste in movies goes down.
Oh, yes. Hey, National Treasure was in fact a treasure.
I do like that movie.
Okay,
it's a guilty pleasure.
Last one that I've done.
Okay.
Per capita cheese consumption correlates with the number of people who died by becoming tangled in their bed sheets.
All right, I'm gonna lose some time on that website. I can already tell.
Yes.
It's not as awesome as it used to be, because it looks like he stopped support for it. Unfortunately, there used to be a section of it where you could find new correlations.
Well, it does look like we covered
Age of Miss
most
America correlates with Murders by
I think
Steve.
the only thing we really missed was skepticism versus cynicism.
Oh, let's talk about that real fast because we aren't quite at 2 hours yet. So that's a
okay.
good one.
Yeah, let's.
Do you want to talk about it? You want to start
over.
the conversation there?
Sure. So I think people have a tendency to unfortunately cross the terms skeptic and cynic.
Definitely, I have a story about that.
So skeptics, literally, the only thing that defines a skeptic is that they're typically inclined to question or doubt, unless they're given a reason not to, significant evidence.
For sure.
Whereas cynics, they seem to. It seems that the cynics actually they miss that benefit of the doubt section of the conversation that we keep coming back to.
Mm-hmm.
They expect everybody to be motivated by self-interest only. A very negative outlook when they question why a thing is how it is, instead of finding the most logical answer, they find the most self-serving one.
Yes.
In my experience.
That's exactly how I feel. I feel like skepticism is just a logical position. Like, I don't just take something at face value. If you tell me there's a pink fairy that lives on the moon, I'm not going to just believe you outright. You'd have to show me evidence. Whereas if
she's really pretty.
Whereas if you tell me that you got a dog, and I'm like, prove it. Prove to me that you have a dog. Like, that's, it's more like I'm just being an ass. I'm just being a cynical, a pessimist. Like, clearly you're lying to me for some reason, and I have no reason to believe that,
right.
But I'm going to act like you are, or act like you have bad motivations or something like that. That's the biggest difference to me. Is cynicism is like skepticism born out of like out of a bad attitude.
It's malicious.
Paranoia, fear. Yeah, it's like
it's malicious intent.
It's a negative emotion.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost what happens when you take because skepticism is curiosity, basically. Then cynicism would be like, well, I lost my metaphor, but.
Well, I have a good one. It's so like when I've been trying to get my wife is currently miserable in her current job. She works ridiculous hours. It's insane, which is why we delayed the show tonight so that I could help her. Her head was hurting real bad. And so, I've been trying to convince her to apply for other jobs and I've been really wanting her to get back into programming. She went to school for some programming, and I genuinely, truly feel like she is on the verge of becoming a decent developer. She just has to get the experience, and she's afraid of it. And she's, she constantly will make up excuses about, well, I'll probably just fail. I don't really know it. It's like a lot of these doubts, but they're just, all these self-doubts aren't really founded on anything specific. It's just a fear of failure, I think, is, I've been trying to.
Probably the word I was looking for then is fear.
Yeah.
But, if skepticism is curiosity, then cynicism is fear.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. And even when it seems like, I feel like a lot of cynical people are cynical as some sort of defense mechanism. And I think that's absolutely right. I think it's indicative of an insecurity a lot of times. I can't say that across the board or anything like that, but because it's probably not that simple, but it's, there's an insecurity there when you become cynical.
I don't know that I'd agree with insecurity, but I certainly agree with indicative of something that you're hiding.
Well, or
hiding behind.
That's true. I mean, in my wife's case, I think there's a little bit of insecurity.
Right.
So I'm probably just expanding that outward for no reason whatsoever. I'm generalizing for no reason. So you're probably right. But yeah, in this particular case, I think there's some insecurity, some fear, and that's, it holds her back. And I'm trying to do everything I can to help her see that, everyone goes through this. I was lucky. I started programming when I was in 7th grade. So I still had that, though. I still had that self-doubt and everything when I went into the corporate world for the first time. And it was in such microcosm compared to her because, this is a brand new industry for her. It's something totally new. So I can imagine it's a much more, that imposter syndrome is probably going to, even after if she does get a job, the imposter syndrome is going to be persistent for, a while until she finally gets comfortable. And so I think that cynicism is that it's pessimism. It's pessimistic skepticism. That's really all it is. And, I think that, like, my grandpa was a cynic. Everything was always just, like, couched in some sort of negative idea. And, it's like everything he was skeptical of or afraid of or whatever was born out of cynicism. It was born out of his bad attitude. I feel like my grandpa had a lot of smart. He thought about a lot of things, and he was pretty smart. But he also was he was untrustworthy of people for reasons that really didn't relate to that. He was untrustworthy of somebody who was just dressed nicely or spoke a certain way or whatever. And sometimes, just depending on the issue, there's, someone speaks like a car salesman, I'm probably skeptical of them too, because what are you trying to sell me? But my grandpa took that to an extreme. And I think that's just part of finding that balance on a lot of that stuff is part of being a skeptic. Being open-minded, but not being so open-minded that your brains fall out, Being open-minded enough to accept new evidence and change your mind, but not being so open-minded that every time someone comes up with a new idea and you hear about it, that's now your opinion until the next person brings up something. And I know people like that. I have a friend that I won't mention his name, but I have a friend who I don't talk to super often. But one day he comes into the chat and he's like, have you guys heard all these flat earth theories? As if because clearly he just stumbled upon it. And he's like, it's crazy. Lordy. It's this is all crazy how much we don't actually know and all this stuff. And I was like, oh no, please don't. I don't want to unfriend you when we get into an argument about it. But yeah,
I would believe that there were mermaids in the ocean before I believed the earth was flat. Because we have actual physical evidence that the earth is not flat. We have no evidence that mermaids don't exist.
I love that.
Because the ocean is only 80% discovered, or not, 80% undiscovered. It's a lot of freaking ocean.
That's a good point. Because you'd have to believe it against the evidence, whereas believing in mermaids, you're not really believing it against evidence. Yeah, I can see it.
Right. And I don't think they're mermaids depicted in fantasy. Because they would have to be deep, deep ocean mermaids, which they would not look like normal humans.
So really just any crazy creature in the deep ocean, we could just call it a mermaid.
Yes.
Have you seen a picture of, when a beluga whale is swimming? And they basically have knees. I could see, let me pull that, I'll pull a picture up.
What?
But you can look at this and see why old-time sailors who did not know what a beluga,
they thought they were
looking at a
men.
mermaid.
I've heard that before.
This is particularly the picture I was thinking of that makes it kind of.
Oh yeah, I could totally see that for sure.
I don't know how to feel about that.
And it's quite frankly that it makes the most sense of any theory I've heard as far as the existence of mermaids.
And that's a lot. That's a lot of the things about trying to trace. I admire historians because their job's got to be really hard, because how much of history is just distorted as it's passed down. The Bible and stuff, for example, are good examples of things that have changed over time through translations, through different monarchies that they just decide, well, this part's wrong, and they rip that out, and then they, it's it's been edited more times than they're willing to admit, and it's hard to pin down what the source.
How are your
guys'
guys' brains not exploding
over the mermaid thing?
This looks like a freaking person.
I've heard of it before, so it's not new to me.
My brain already exploded 2 years ago or whenever it was when I first stumbled across the theory. So, and was like, oh fuck, well that makes a lot of.
I guess I'm just so
that makes a lot of sense.
I'm not surprised, I guess, is why my brain doesn't explode.
Well, I'm not surprised that it's a whale or anything. I'm just surprised at how accurate it looks to like a person's physique.
I guess
To-
there's
just
so
like
many
a
instances in my life where I
agree.
think I see something. Like, there's so many times I've seen a figure in the dark. I'm like, that is a person. What are they doing? And then as soon as you shine a light on it, it's like, oh, it's like a freaking grocery bag on a tree branch or something. It's like, it's like there's so many instances of that I'm like instantly skeptical. Now I'll see something in the dark and I'm just like, well, I guess if it's really a person, then my time has just come. Back to sleep.
Oh my god. Oh my gosh. Ridiculous.
But it's more likely not a person, so I'm going to not investigate because I'm tired as hell.
Right, it's a ghost. They're gonna eat you.
But let's go ahead and wrap it up. We're exactly 2 hours now. So I'll let you guys do. If there's any, do you guys want to say any closing remarks before we go?
No, I think we did a pretty good job covering what we wanted to cover.
Awesome. Yeah, I was trying really hard not to branch off into my next things because we don't have time to dive into them. So it's like I feel like this is a good place to stop.
I think we did a good job setting out a reasonable number of topics with time to take tangents.
For sure.
Yes.
Awesome.
So
I really enjoyed this,
it
you
a lot.
guys. It was super fun, and it was nice to talk about these issues without just, doing the usual circle jerk of just being, bashing everything and stuff. And I'm not saying I don't enjoy that. Don't get me wrong. So don't stop.
No
don't
more
stop
circle
it in
jerks.
Discord.
Sorry.
I gotta
No
have
more circle
I gotta
jerks.
have my memes making fun of the world that's dying. But no, this is a good way to break that trend and do something different. So I really had a lot of fun. Thank you guys, and thanks to everybody who happens to see this. We're going to put it on a audio podcast feed as well as YouTube. You can check us out on chevcast.tv, where we'll have links to our other stuff. You can check out the rest of our YouTube channel. We do a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. In fact, I think we're doing our Lumiere campaign tomorrow. I don't know, with the holidays, everything's kind of up in the air. Are we doing Tomb on Wednesday, Dan?
I'm still planning on doing Tomb on Wednesday, yeah.
Okay.
As long as everybody else is in. I know that's 2 days before Christmas, but
I'm down.
a lot of times 2 days. I was going to say a lot of times 2 days before Christmas is actually perfect because you're not doing anything
Exactly.
on the 23rd because you're gearing up for doing stuff on the 24th and 25th. So
For sure.
Yes.
All right. Well, everybody, have a Merry Christmas, and we'll see you next week, next Monday. I plan to do this again.
happy holidays. What is it,
Yes.
Yule today, or was?
Yule and winter solstice.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.